very much, Jen, and thank TMS for the invitation and for the opportunity to be part of such an esteemed panel. So I was hearing the presentation of Halil of the classification societies. It's no question that AI is bringing us on the verge of technological revolution. So on that view, ship recycling might be a humble matter, but still a very important one. So I would like to just touch upon the sustainability factor included in the ship recycling business. Of course, by introduction, GMS, a few things about who we are, what do we do. We have been in this industry of ship recycling for the past 32 years now. We have negotiated in excess of 5,500 deals, taken over more than 1,100 vessels on as-is basis all around the globe, undertaking the last voyage to the recycling destination. We have 12 offices around the globe. We maintain on average a 30 to 35% market share in the subcontinent, especially where the majority of ship recycling action takes place. We have conducted several tows, and one of the big vertical in our group is what we call the SSORP, which is the Sustainable Ship and Offshore Recycling Program. So effectively, we have a full vertical in our group under which we do the IHM, the Inventory of Hazardous Materials sampling. We produce the reports, we go on and monitor the recycling process. End of the day, we report back to owners, and we ensure strict adherence with the guidelines of the Hong Kong Convention. Moving on, the items that I'm going to try at least to cover without utilizing too much time will be an overview of the tanker fleet. End of the day, this is a TMS Tanker Conference. We're going to look on ship recycling and how this is contributing to the sustainability of the industry altogether. We're going to look at some regulations, but special focus will be given to the Hong Kong Convention, which is actually coming to force in 2025. We're going to have a look at Alang, and then we're going to discuss one last thing. So I don't know if indeed you can see these numbers, but I will try to just make brief statements on this. This is the overview of the tanker fleet as of today, and this is taken from Clarkson's data as of October. As you can see from the totality of the fleet currently in water, there is a very, very heavy order book. I mean, I just observe a whooping LR2 order book, 38% almost of the current existing fleet. As you can see, several of the clean carriers, like for example, the MRs, the products, the LR1s, they all have in double digits the order book. So it's definitely an over-order sector. Of course, we have to compare this not only in absolute numbers, but also in terms of actual deadweight that is in water and actual deadweight that is being on order. So as you can see, just drawing your attention to the last row actually, where the total deadweight in water today is 721 million tons. Of course, we're considering only the tanker fleet, and on order 91 million tons. Now, this gives you one picture, the supply. What has actually exited the market past 3 years in terms of tonnage being recycled? And as you can see, 2022 was a relatively active year in ship recycling for tankers. 23 has come down significantly. 2024, it's practically non-existent. 25 units is literally nothing. So overall, you have 212 vessels being recycled over the period of the last 3 years, tanker vessels I'm talking about, and the total deadweight exiting is something short of 7 million deadweight. So effectively, the picture is that we have about 90 million tons hitting the water in the next 2 to 3 years, while we had less than 7 million tons exiting the last 3 years. What does this mean? What are the conclusions we can draw? Number one, it's an over-order sector. And this is obviously a token to the performance of the clean market the past 2 to 3 years. Number two, it's an aging fleet. There is no significant recycling activity. So just looking through another scope, ship recycling, that of sustainability. How is actually ship recycling contributing to the sustainability of the sector? We have been, as I said, in the industry for 32 years. We have done our own studies, our own investments, and we have measured actually what are the products of the ship recycling process. It's I'm very proud of this. I mean, it's like more than 97% of the total weight of a vessel, of a tanker vessel, let's say, is actually either reused, repurposed, or recycled overall. In some cases, depending on the vessel exact size, might be even going up to 99%, with the remaining 1 to 3% actually being Either the hazardous materials that need to be somehow downstream handled or just steel loss. Also, a fun fact here is that for the steel amount that is being recovered from the process of ship recycling, the greenhouse gas emissions are only a quarter of the exact equivalent amount of steel being produced from virgin steel. What does virgin steel mean? Process of mining, transporting the iron ore, melting, creating bars and ingots. So the carbon footprint of what we consider green steel, which is still recovered from ship recycling, is 1/4 of the actual production from iron ore. Of course, we have, as I said, the same couple minutes ago, we have our own vertical that's doing these measurements, and it's approved by LR and so on and so forth to that extent for the carbon footprint estimation. And just an example for the audience, we had recycled, that was a year back, a 29,000 metric ton light ship tanker in Alang, India. This is the example. And from the steel recovered, the carbon footprint was measured to be something short of 10,000 metric tons. The equivalent quantity recovered, if it was actually being produced from conventional methods, as I said, from virgin steel, it will have a carbon footprint of 40,000. So you have, only by recycling the vessel and recovering the steel, net savings on greenhouse gas emissions, CO2 and so on, of 30,000 metric tons. So it is a sustainable process and a green process, as green as it gets. Of course, there's always a changing regulatory landscape that we have to move around and find our way and be compliant with. This is what I like to personally call regulatory pasta, simply because there are so many regulations, some of them taking a regional approach to international conventions, so on and so forth. I'm not going to take too much time into this. I'm sure that we're going to discuss this later at the panel, but there are certain criteria under which the applicable regulations coming into force. So, for example, if you have the flag is one criteria, the second is the port, last port of call prior recycling. So in case you have an EU flag vessel, no matter where it is in the globe, it has to go to an EU approved yard. We're talking about 44 yards, primarily in EU. So keep in mind that you might have an undertow tag in Australia flying, let's say, German flag, and still needs to go all the way back to EU to be recycled. So this is a big question, no matter if it's in an EU port or not. Now, if you have a non-EU flag vessel, if it is an EU port, then it needs to be exported through Basel Convention with the applicable ban amendment and so on and so forth. It has to go to only an OECD country to be recycled. We can discuss this later. If you want, I'm happy to take questions at a later stage. Anyway, if you don't have an EU flag and you are not in an EU port, then you can go practically wherever you want to recycle your vessel. But what is the solution to all this? And what we believe firmly in GMS is that the solution is the Hong Kong Convention. Actually, it's the Hong Kong International Convention for the Safe and Environmentally Sound Recycling of Ships, which was adopted initially in 2009 by the IMO. It's still till today the only IMO regulation governing ship recycling. There were 3 criteria for these guidelines to be actually converted into a law and international law, and all criteria were met last June. And from coming June 2025, it will be in full force as the first global regulation of IMO for ship recycling. The Hong Kong Convention has specific provisions. Number 1 being that we need to map on each vessel what are the hazardous materials. That's why the hazmat experts have to survey the vessel and actually provide IHM Part 1, 2, and 3. Thereafter, the recycling yard that will undertake the recycling of the vessel needs to have a ship recycling facility plan, which is exactly a map of all the infra on the yard that will serve as a purpose of the recycling. Of course, each yard is subject to audit and approval and obtaining a statement of compliance by EIS classification societies, which are the certifying bodies in shipping, as we all know. So based on the map of the hazardous waste on the vessel and the map of the facility, marrying these two together, we come up with a ship recycling plan that is an actual step-by-step recycling process, which is vessel-specific and recycling yard-specific. So there are many provisions of the Hong Kong Convention. I'm not going to take too much time again. It helps and actually prevents the adverse effects to human health and the environment, ensures the emergency preparedness. There is a standardized reporting of incidents and accidents, the safety of workers and training them is actually a must, and we as GMS have invested a lot of hours and money on actually going and training in the 3 subcontinent recycling destinations the workers. And upon completion, the yards always issue a statement of completion for recycling describing the process. So Hong Kong Convention yards are the yards that have been certified from IX classification societies. In India, you have 105 yards being certified as such from IX classification societies, the likes of LR, of RINA, Class NK, so on and so forth. Out of the total, probably around 107 yards. So Alang is currently 99% almost compliant with HKC. In Turkey, we have about 21 yards being already approved. In Bangladesh, only 5, but this number will increase the coming years. Indonesia, only 2. In UAE, we have 1 as of last year, if I'm not wrong, which is Dubai Dry Docks. In Bahrain, we have 1, which is a 3 shipyard, and none in China and Pakistan, which are the other 2, let's say, major recycling destinations worldwide. So why is HKC better? Why does it solve this regulatory pasta that I was referring to before? First of all, because it's the only IMO-created guidelines that were converted into a regulation. And IMO, nobody is more, let's say, competent than IMO to make a regulation with regards to shipping. Provides one universal and equal approach for all vessels that are going to recycling, no matter if it is EU flag or not, if it's an EU port or not, wherever it is. The yards are approved by the classification societies, ensure sustainability, and this is a comment that I would like to make. As far as we are concerned, sustainability has several factors in it, one being the protection of the human element, second being the protection of the environment, but third being also the economical and financial sustainability. End of the day, if it does not make sense, commercial sense, then it's not a sustainable solution end of the day. All these 3 factors have to marry. A small focus in India, specifically in Alang, some historical data here. 8,700 vessels have been recycled since 1982, where the first recorded recycling took place. Actually, more than 67 million tons of steel have been recovered from recycling all these vessels. And my team is always coming up with this fancy, let's say, data, and this equates to about 9,135 Eiffel Towers worth of steel, or 9.5 years of daily New York City power consumption, and this is compared to the energy savings that we else have utilized for virgin steel production. We have recovered more than 154,000 tons of wood, and this is from decks, insulations, and so on and so forth. And this equivalent amount of wood, if it was taken from deforestation and cutting down trees, actually this contributed to capturing 4,660 tons of CO2. So these are just some key facts. So just having a little specific approach to tanker recycling in Alang, the last 5 years we had 187 tankers being recycled, and this still equates to about 1.43 million tons. The GHG emissions that were produced during recycling was something short of 500,000, and the equivalent still being produced from virgin steel, then it would be almost 2 million metric tons. So you have a 1.5 million almost metric tons of CO2 net savings, carbon savings. So having discussed the ship recycling industry, how ship recycling is sustainable, I would like to take my last minute, as was informed by Tien, to advise one last thing, and this is the elephant in the room. This is a dark fleet. The picture as of today is that we're talking approximately of 23% of the global tanker fleet. Of course, there are various, let's say, approximations, 600, 1,500, but anyway, nobody really knows. Some common characteristics these vessels have are that the average age is over 18 years of age, could be 18, could be 20, could be 23. They're in poor condition. They cannot go to standard dry docks. They cannot deal with standard dry docks and suppliers. The insurance in question, P&I cover, is just a piece of paper, majority of them. They're trading in suction routes, and the transactions are in different currencies other than the US monetary system. The dark fleet growth is actually a very alarming thing, and this means that the sanction trades are expanding, correct? I mean, the trade is there, that's why the fleet is growing, and this means that effectively the sanctions are failing. Sanctions having the primary goal of minimizing these trades, not expanding them. There is a risk of loss of human life, pollution. These transactions are nowhere recorded. Might be money laundering involved. The poor maintenance, together with a non-substantial insurance cover and the vintage age, is a ticking time bomb. Creation of two-tier market and so on and so forth. The most important thing, they cannot be recycled as well in accordance with the national standards. And this is because cash buyers like GMS cannot buy them and normal yards cannot recycle them. So what's going to happen with that 23% of the tanker fleet? Making some headlines, my favorite being zombie VLCC reappears after 3 years after being scrapped. But the most important thing here is how can we solve this? How can recycling help into this issue to find a solution? And this is where the governments need to take the responsibility, approach the market stakeholders, the industry stakeholders, and say, guys, let's find a solution. We can give approvals to you, and you can go and transact in an open, transparent way. We can record everything, the owner, the vessel, the amount, but let these vessels exit the market because they are ticking time bombs. And recycling is the only actual solution that can be given to a very, very big chunk of the tanker fleet. I think this concludes. The takeaways are there, but I know that I'm running short on time, so I think I'm going to have some questions later. Thank you very much.